The next animals we're going to talk about are sheep and goats. Very little is written about goats for factory farming, so I put them in the same section as sheep. What these two types of animals have in common is that they're exploited on three fronts: their meat, milk, and hair. People think that producing wool is just a haircut for the animal, but this isn't true. I plan to talk about this topic in another video. It's an industry which is fueled by a product which comes from an animal's body, and this inevitably leads to exploitation. The animals are treated badly in order for the industry to stay efficient and keep up with consumer demand. Sheep have it especially bad because they've been selectively bred to produce more wool. A sheep left out in the wild for a couple of years will grow hundreds of pounds of hair and will risk dying of heat stroke. They didn't start out this way naturally. If they had, their ancestors would have died out long before we could have captured and domesticated them. So if we do take care of sheep without using their hair, we should still give them haircuts, but not turn them into an industry to produce our clothes. Sheep are kept in smaller numbers compared to other animals, but the conditions are still cramped and filthy. The average building has about 1,000 sheep crammed together. The top 0.1% of farms have 20% of the United States sheep and keep flocks of 100,000 crammed together. Because the conditions are so filthy, their fur becomes matted with dirt and flies growing mold and fungus. Sheep have become susceptible to fly strike, a skin infection caused by maggots. To prevent fly strike, areas of a sheep's backside where maggots like to burrow are sliced off, pieces of the skin are removed, painkiller isn't used, and in Australia, where a quarter of the world's wool is produced, that painkiller is merely recommended rather than mandated. Feces will build up around a sheep's tail, so the tail is removed. This isn't done out of love for the sheep. We wouldn't have to do this if sheep roamed free and were taken care of instead of used for wool. The two methods are either slicing the tail off or tying a rubber band around the tail until it rots and falls off. This practice increases a sheep's risk of having their rectum prolapse. Sheep are often starved before being sheared so that they're too dizzy to react to stress. Shearing is a low wage, high risk job. Workers have to shave as many animals as possible each hour quickly. Terrified animals like goats, llamas, and sheep are pinned down. The workers often cut the animals but accidentally injure themselves. The risk of injury is higher here than any other field. This is terrifying for the sheep because they're prey animals. Goats grow less hair and are only shaved twice a year, but the process is still painful and produces fear in the animal. Goat hair is called cashmere, and most cashmere is produced in the cold mountains of China and Mongolia. Herds of goat are kept and are often shaved in the winter to meet consumer demand, causing many of the animals to freeze to death. Sheep produce less wool when they're older, and when they're too old to make enough money for the farms, that they're sent away to be killed for meat. Sheep meat becomes mutton if the animal is about a year old, otherwise, it's lamb. Sheep naturally live 10 to 12 years. We rightly see the veal industry as excessively cruel and barbaric. Baby cows are kept confined in crates and purposefully not fed iron to make the meat more white so that the people who eat it feel more fancy. This doesn't make it taste any better once it's cooked. Like the consumption of any baby animal, it's presented as a status symbol when it's just a way for the industry to save money on male animals, which are less efficient for making money for them. With baby cows, we use bougie words like veal to cover up with what it really is. Similarly, when baby goats are made into meat, we call it cabrito meat. They're killed only a week after birth. With lamb, We don't even bother with a euphemism because we associate lambs with ritual sacrifice. In fact, in the US, people prefer lamb meat, perhaps because of the religious imagery or the idea that the meat of a baby animal is softer and lamb meat is less flavorful than mutton, which makes it better somehow. Rather than softening the mutton up in meat tenderizer, we eat lamb because the word lamb brings up nice images in our mind rather than the horrific slaughter of a baby animal. Sheep are in particularly high demand when it comes to meat slaughtered in accordance with religious tenets, although these rules apply to other animals. The government has laws requiring that animals be stunned before being killed. However, exemptions are provided for religious requirements. These rules forbid the use of animals which are sick and injured and require that they be killed with one fell swoop of the knife. Therefore, an animal can't be knocked out before being killed. Back when these religious laws were written, this was probably the best method available. However, religious rules combined with our sanitary laws, which don't allow one animal to lay down in the blood of another animal, have created a horrible combination. Instead of quickly slamming the animal to the ground and killing it, we hang an animal like a cow upside down, and there are a lot of animals to kill, and the guy who cuts the animal with one swoop has to make sure not to miss. All the while, the panicked animal is resisting. While hung upside down, its leg bones crack and the skin slides off. There's a quote that sums it up very well. It's harder to imagine a better example of how strictly sticking with the letter of a law can pervert its spirit. Due to changing times, even some Orthodox Jewish rabbis and groups of Muslims no longer believe that this is the correct way to carry out their religious tenets. Parts of the animal which are forbidden are separated and sold on the open market, with no label indicating its origin. Goats have to be impregnated every year to keep producing milk. Through artificial insemination, they are kept perpetually pregnant. The males are considered less efficient. There are a lot of them which is unwanted. They are castrated and quickly slaughtered for meat, and the castration method is the same method that I've mentioned previous times in this playlist, and no painkillers are used. The females aren't fed milk, but instead given formula. These young animals are impregnated as soon as it's physically possible. They produce 1 to 3 liters of milk a day, 7,000 liters over 10 years. A whole bunch of goats are lined up on top of a machine to which their udders are hooked. When the exhausted female animal can't take it anymore, they're slaughtered for meat. Anyways, goats grow horns which fall off for part of the year and then grow back, similar to hair, teeth, or fingernails. Goats used for their hair have their horns removed so that the animal doesn't resist while shaven. The horns are removed with a hot iron, and the skin is burned to ensure that the horns don't grow back. It would be like if you had your entire fingernail removed, but a hot iron was used to prevent it from going back. But the analogy is worse because horns are much larger than fingernails. A more applicable part of the body would be your teeth. Though they are small, they're on top of your gums, which are sensitive. Imagine a molar which is firmly in place being forcibly pulled out of your mouth and no painkiller is used, but imagine that molar is 100 times larger and attached to your skull. Now combine that with the pain of putting your hand in the oven with no glove. That's what they feel. No painkiller is used. Not only does dehorning cause pain and stress during the operation, but also causes pain for a long time afterwards. Sheep are crammed into tiny stalls which are only slightly larger than their bodies. While they're luckier than animals that live their whole lives in cages and which are barely the size of their bodies, even this life is unhappy and cramped. The animals still can't turn around. They're attached to a milking claw and a vacuum tube which pumps the milk out of her udders. The stress caused by the machine causes mastitis, a painful swelling of the udder which leads to unwanted bacteria in milk. as with other animals, sheep are castrated using the method that I've talked about in this playlist, and no painkiller is used.